Now that we've proven that life does not have behind it this designer or creator, then that lays the foundation for Schopenhauer's two main points about the nature of life and what makes it worth living. And they can be summed up in two very short and pithy sentences. Life sucks, and it's not worth it. Now, of course, people like Boethius have already agreed that this earthly life sucks and is full of suffering. But he believes that suffering is worth it because behind it is a goal that makes life worth living and makes all the pain and suffering you go into and go through part of the boot camp that makes you fit for eternity. But for Schopenhauer, we've already shown it makes no sense to say there's a God. And so this suffering is just that. Suffering, meaningless nonsense. So in this video, we're going to concentrate on his rationale behind why life sucks. And it can be summed up again in another very pithy saying. Life is suffering. Now you notice how I didn't say this. I didn't say life is full of suffering. I'm saying that once we understand the nature of life, indeed it is identical to, it's equal to suffering. The very structure of life is suffering. When we do Buddhism and we understand the nature of the teaching of the Buddha, we're going to see Schopenhauer is deeply influenced by the Buddha here. And indeed, he himself admits that a lot of what he's telling you is a separate reasoning toward the same conclusions that Eastern philosophy has given us about the nature of life. So we're not just saying life is full of suffering, we're saying it's almost as if you were designed to suffer. So how do we prove that? Well, like Boethius, we agree that the whole nature of existence is a sort of striving or movement towards something. When we look, we see everything's in constant states of change, and they're always changing toward other things. And therefore, everything is always striving. What is the difference between mere existence and life? Well, you add to that consciousness. So what is life but conscious striving? A striving that's aware of the goal toward which it's striving. The more aware it is of that, the more alive it is. So knowledge or self-conscious striving is what we would call desire. Now we all know one thing about desire. Desire is something which I want, but I don't have. When I desire, for example, food, it's precisely because I don't have the food, I'm hungry, and therefore I want it. So all striving presupposes and involves some sort of desire. And to desire something is to want what you don't have. When I want a date with that girl that I saw the other day, what does that mean but that I don't have that date? When I want money, what does that mean except that I don't have that money? Now you might say, I might have the money, but I still want it. Yes, what you want is to maintain that money. What you want is not secure already. What you want maybe is more money than you already have. You cannot want something that you already have. And when you want something, it implies that you don't have it, that you have a want. So, what is suffering? Well, suffering is just the consciousness of my own dissatisfaction. When I want something but don't have it, I'm dissatisfied. And there are two forms that dissatisfaction can take. One is a physical dissatisfaction. That's what we call pain. And all that pain is my body's consciousness of the thwarting of my body's function or will. And then, of course, there's the more thorough case of suffering, and that is when I am conscious of something that's not physical that I want, that which could fulfill me, but I don't have it. And so suffering is just the consciousness of what I don't have, the consciousness of the thwarting or the lack of fulfillment. So, thus we have shown that since life is conscious striving, which involves desire, which involves want or dissatisfaction, and that living things are conscious of that, and the more conscious you are, the more conscious you are of that lack or dissatisfaction, then life itself is suffering. Now, you've noticed something, that there's a matter of degrees here. Thus, the more you know, the more you suffer. Because suffering is a sort of consciousness. And it's a consciousness of what I don't have. It's a consciousness of the pain of not having, the dissatisfaction of lacking. And so therefore, the more I know, the more I suffer. And therefore, humans are a lot worse off than animals, because humans are able to envision their future. And by envisioning their future, they are able to envision the various possibilities of their fulfillment. So say, for example, I've always wanted a new car. And so what do? Well, as a human, I not only envision that new car, I fantasize about it. What does it mean to fantasize? Well, it means that I imagine myself, I run through my mind of me having that car. And by doing that, what do? I set up an ideal for myself, an ideal of what it would mean to feel the fulfillment of having what I wish for. I imagine getting into the car, I imagine the shininess of the car, I imagine how it will drive, I imagine going on various trips with the car, I imagine getting out of the car and people being impressed with, wow, what a nice car you have. And in all of these things, I set up a possible future, don't I? I set up an ideal. Now, an ideal is an ideal precisely because it's something that's impossible. It's something that's perfect. I have envisioned what the perfect fulfillment of my desire is. And that's what knowledge gives me, is that ability to imagine a future that doesn't come to pass. It's all hypothetical. But then what does that mean? That means, say, I do get that new car. I get the new car, but it will never measure up to the ideal. And therefore, what have I done? By the very possibility of me envisioning the perfect, I have set up that no fulfillment, actual fulfillment of that, will ever measure up. And therefore, what looks good from afar, when I get close up and actually get it, will always be a disappointment. Therefore, the more you can grasp, the more you are able to set up that higher ideal. And therefore, the more you're able to see what is higher than what you actually get. It's called comparison. And comparison kills contentment. Let me say that again. Comparison kills contentment. Whatever I actually do get will never measure up to what I can possibly imagine. And therefore, I'm going to have what I call the problem of What I get, there will always be something that looks better. If it's new, there will always be something that is newer. If it's beauty, whatever I have that I think is beautiful, I will always be able to imagine something more beautiful, beautifuler. And thus the problem of is the problem that whatever I chase after, when I get it, it will never measure up. One, because it will never measure up to the ideal that I've set for myself in my mind. And number two, it will never measure up to what I can compare it to. Because Schopenhauer realizes that no amount of suffering or joy is absolute. It's always finite. And the more I know, the more I'm able to compare to others. And therefore, the more I'm able to sing the song that we all know. And that is the song, I Wish That I Had Jesse's Girl. Why can't I find a woman like that? Well, the reason why I can't find a woman like that is because Jesse's girl is not my girl. If I were to achieve that girl, it wouldn't be Jesse's girl. And therefore, I wouldn't want it. And so thus we have this eternal problem that the structure of life is desire, and that the more I know, the more I desire the ideal or the better, and therefore the more I can never get it, because whatever I do get, I can always imagine better. And when I bring that comparison to what I actually have, I get the grass is greener on the other side, and therefore dissatisfaction and more desire. So the whole cycle of desire is what life is made up of. There's no escape from it, because the minute you escape from desire, you escape from striving. And the minute you escape from striving, you escape from existence itself. The very structure of our life and our consciousness is to desire what we don't have and to never be able to achieve what we want. Because the more we understand, the less we're satisfied with what we actually do get. Life is structured to be a letdown, and is structured to force you to continue to chase after that which you know you can never get. Thus, life isn't just full of suffering, life is suffering itself.